Thanks for joining us here tonight. There's a few of us here. We're going to be discussing the topic, Change Your Consciousness, Change Your Life. We're all members of a group called Ekankar, and Ekankar is a spiritual path that helps us connect with our deepest nature. And we're going to be sharing some things that have worked for us. And we're not here to necessarily make you want to become a member of Ekankar or anything like that. It's just you may get something out of this program that will work for you, whether you're a member of Ekankar or not. I was thinking about this change your consciousness, change your life, and one thing that came to me is, what does consciousness mean? You know, that might be a question somebody might ask. And I was looking through a book, and this is a book called The Call of Soul. It's by the spiritual leader of Ekankar, Harold Klump. And in it, I'm going to start off by reading. It says, an individual's state of consciousness simply means his ability to accept change in his life. So when you go changes, it can be big changes, small changes, an attitude change. It could be something like a job change, relationship change. Anything is a change, and it's all about how we accept these things. And that helps us with our quality of life, is the way I see this. In a minute, everybody's going to introduce themselves, but I just was thinking about this on the way. One of the changes is fear. And I used to be very afraid of being in front of people like this, and petrified. You know, it'd be so much fear, like it'd be thick. You could cut it with a knife, and I couldn't even think. You know, and this morning I had that again. It'd been a while, and I was like, oh my God, I'm back in this place again that I haven't been in a long time. I wasn't really sure why, but I was there. You know, it was like my stomach was upset, and I was like, I can't even think a sentence. How am I going to do this now? And I just used a technique that we're going to be sharing later, and over the course of the day, all of a sudden I started feeling better. You know, and the change in consciousness happened. I went from a place of fear to a place of love, and my life changed. Basically, it became much more pleasant in the moment. You know, and I was able to say a few words. And we all have things to share on this topic tonight, and I'd like to start by having everybody introduce themselves, and we'll start on everybody's left here.
My name is Jasmine Gibbs, and I'm a college administrator, and I live here and work here in Boston. And I just moved to Boston. I'm new to the area.
My name is Joy Cumming. I'm from Cape Cod. I live on the elbow of Cape Cod. I work as an architect, and I'm delighted to join my friends here this evening.
My name is Chris Volchek. I'm from the Berkshires. Drove out this afternoon to be with you all tonight, and I live there with my wife and daughter and a couple of cats, and we just met tonight, but I'm also an architect. But you got to prevent us from taking over the show and redesigning
your consciousness.
Yeah, we'll just try to keep it low.
You want that flowers moved over a little bit?
I was thinking that. What do you think?
A little bit off symmetry is good.
So I didn't introduce myself. My name is Mark Lapatowski, and I'm from Gloucester. I'm an electronic technician. I'm married, and then we have a cat also.
I'm Ellie Malik, and I'm from Arlington, and I am a retired teacher and a musician, and I live with my wonderful dog, Layla.
My name's Kathleen Claycomb. I've been a Somerville resident for over 25 years. I'm also a retired teacher, after-school teacher. I play the ukulele, and I have a pet parakeet and a frog.
I'm Robert Claycomb. This is my wife. I'm a Somerville resident for a long time also. I'm a musician and an artist and a scientist, not necessarily in that order.
So we're going to start off here when we talked about change of consciousness, accept change in your life. A lot of ways that can be considered a turning point. So I'm going to just throw this question out there. Could you talk about an experience that was a turning point for you? And anybody could join in.
Yeah, this past weekend I went to a songwriting retreat just spontaneously. A friend coordinated it, and I've been performing musically for a number of years. In fact, with Mark and other friends here. But this was a challenging one because I was sort of immersed in a lot of people who were, semi-professional, professional musicians, but they were like challenging themselves to like write and perform like at the drop of a hat. So like you, I suddenly discovered and realized a lot of fears that were there. And then I said to myself, well, gee, you know, where's the spiritual consciousness in all of this? You know, why is it that I'm suddenly having to confront these things for the first time? And there was something about, you know, just realizing that in every new situation, every thing we challenge ourselves with, and expands our consciousness and makes us prepared for kind of new levels of awareness and understanding. And I just sort of, I performed in a way that I had never performed before, and with a completely different voice and a completely different response from the audience. It was an incredible breakthrough. I can't tell you what it was about or why it happened, but it just put me in a whole nother kind of position relative to my relationship with my music and my relationship with any audience. So.
It's interesting how these things, to me, it's really about quality of life as much as anything, because it's not necessarily about material things, but your life is so much richer, like the experience you're expressing there.
Well, the story that I wanted to share first was one of my very, very early experiences. I think I had just turned 5 years old, and we had traveled across the country to visit my relatives in the Midwest. My grandparents lived in Colorado, and my father's sister lived in Nebraska. And when we stayed with her and her family, they entertained us with, her husband was a minister, and she played the church organ. And they entertained us with piano and songs. And I heard a couple of songs for the first time. And I always loved music, but that was the first time I'd heard it done that way. And when everybody was eating, having the rest of their dinner, I snuck into the parlor and I started picking at the piano. And I found out that melody that I heard you could find here. And it was huge, a huge change. And of course, my aunt caught me doing it, and I kind of ran away and hid. But later on, my next door neighbors happened to have a piano and also owned a piano company. Oh. And my neighbor's mother told on me that I was sitting at the piano all the time now, picking out songs. And so we got a piano, and that started a life journey right there.
Being open to taking what comes your way is so amazing. Like you at the, songwriter conference, and a 7-year-old being open to going feeling free enough to go to the piano and play. What I wanted to share was how I got my dog. And I went to a shelter, and I wanted this other dog, this cute little black dog that was jumping all up and friendly, and its hair was curly, and they said it didn't shed. That was a biggie. And I wanted this dog, but they said I couldn't have that dog because I was retired, and they had a special dog for me. I didn't have to fill anything out, just take the dog home. So I went, they said, go to your car and we'll bring the dog out. So I went to my car, and they came with the dog, and they put the dog on my lap. And I'm thinking, this is very strange, but maybe I should do this. So I took the dog home, and my dog just stayed in one place. She was so afraid. They did tell me she hadn't been treated well as a puppy, and I couldn't get her to eat, and it was very, very hard, very hard. And another thing about connecting your practical life with your spiritual life is that you can get inner nudges. It's kind of a knowingness that you know it's true. And I got this inner nudge, and it said, hand feed the dog. So I started hand feeding her, and she really blossomed and really came into her own. And I thought, oh, isn't this great? I'm giving so much love to this dog. I am just giving love to this dog. This is changing this dog's life. It didn't hit me till years later. The dog was giving love to me. The dog was teaching me how to love. And I realized what a gift that I had this dog given to me. And being open to receive love is just as important as giving it. And my dog taught me a lot.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful story. It makes me I was thinking of when I just decided to maybe share this because it came up, but since we're talking about your dog and the love and music and love for music, I had an experience where as a child I really wanted a ukulele, and I wanted a baritone, and for my birthday, my parents gave me a small soprano. I was very disappointed. And I said, but it's not a baritone. Can you take it back? And she said, a ukulele is a ukulele. I asked for lessons, and she said, they said, oh, you'll have to teach yourself. And I kind of created an attitude right then. I didn't want to teach myself. I didn't want to do any of that. So years later, any time I could have maybe gone to a store and found a baritone for myself. But years later, Robert surprised me with one for our anniversary. And many, many years later. And my first thought was, I'm not sure that dream is still alive. And I'm not sure I still love the ukulele like I did back then. But it was interesting because once I touched it, it changed the whole feeling I had about the whole experience as a child, because it was always my big lament. I never got my ukulele. My parents didn't understand me. Oh, woe is me, you know. And I would tell that story often to Robert. And when I picked up the ukulele, something happened, something clicked. And it was like all of that was washed away. It was such a turning point for me, because now I realized my dream was still there. It was just reawakened, or maybe this was the time as an adult to get to go and pursue this goal. So it just took off for me, and it's been about 5 years, and I'm writing music now. And since we were talking about music too, and love takes you a pretty far
Yeah,
away, and
I
I'm
should-
grateful now to my parents.
Yes.
Because she was telling me, you have to teach yourself. And that's exactly what I did.
Oh, wow.
As an adult, I took the initiative, and I've been teaching myself.
Were you going to say something?
Well, I just wanted to give you the sort of part B of the initial story, which was we got the ukulele home and I showed her like 4 chords. And then at 2 or 3 in the morning, I came downstairs and said, "Are you coming to bed?" Because she was up all night strumming and strumming and strumming. And she started to write songs without any coaching from me. So it was pretty miraculous, I think.
So it's interesting, we're talking about change of consciousness and accepting change, and the changes we're really talking about is becoming more aware of ourselves and the changes that are happening in us, and seeing our patterns as much as anything,
I think one of the things about change is that you don't always know what the change is while it's happening. And sometimes you keep waiting for the end of the change to occur, and it just doesn't. It's hard because you don't know what the outcome is. You don't understand why the change had to happen, and you don't necessarily understand where you're going. And I think for me, what has been a huge thing that I've had to learn in my spiritual journey is to trust as change is happening, that it's happening for a reason, and I'm going to come out on the other side, spiritually stronger. And I know for me, I've had a very long year. Part of it, has been moving here, getting a new job. I graduated from the graduate program I was in. And actually just this past December was a 1-year anniversary of a foot surgery I had. So it was the foot surgery, and then I had a relationship that ended in February last year, and then I had to graduate from law school, and then I had to take the bar, and then I got this job, and I had to move to Massachusetts, and it was just boom, boom, boom. And I I don't know if I could sit here and say, this is what I learned from my experience, but I do know that, while this kind of watershed year has been happening, I have felt a huge shift in my consciousness, basically in my, exactly what the book is saying, in my ability to accept all these changes that were happening. And as little things would happen, being grateful for the little gifts I would get along the way. A couple weeks before I got the job in Boston, I actually signed a lease on an apartment in Atlanta. And about a week after I signed the lease, something happened in the apartment. There was a leak, and the guy, and usually landlords don't do this, but he said, I'll let you out of the lease if you want. And I was just like, wow. And, and I knew at this point, I'd started to hear like an inkling that the Boston job might be happening, and I was just like, he's like, I'll let you out of the lease if you want right now. And, landlords never say that. They're always trying to like make you stay. And like just little things like that happening on the way, to help me nudge me along in the change process. And I do feel now coming out of this kind of crazy year, in a way a little bit lighter. And I don't know how to describe it other than that. Like, I've really kind of come back to my core as like, there are certain things in my life that are important, my family, my friends, how I treat other people, and then all these other things that I had spent so much time worrying about are really not that important anymore. So it's like I feel a little bit freer, even though, I don't know, it didn't seem during this year that would be the end result, but it's true.
Lighter is good. Definitely. I think when I heard the topic and we talk about change in consciousness, change in life, there's a kind of an understanding now in our society that change is good. We think about there's almost a slogan: change is good. There's a radio program that's sponsored by a local college where I am, and their motto is never fear change. So it puts change in that context, but change isn't always easy. I thought of this topic, and there's the big changes in life can be relationship, moving, career change, and I thought back to about 17 years ago. I had all three happened at once. So sometimes change can kind of sneak up on you, as you're living in your life and you get a new relationship and you get more comfortable in it, and it kind of grows. Your career shifts. Well, this one happened all at once. So it was 1, 2, 3, and we met and fallen in love, and we're visiting back and forth. I was in Toronto. She was in Massachusetts. So I came down for the big visit to kind of see if this was going to work. And we spent some time together, and I met her grown daughter, and I was like, this is a totally different place to live. I was coming from a big city. This was like a very rural area. And that night I was like, boy, I don't know if I can do this. This is like a lot. So the next day, we were going for a hike, and she asked me, she said, Chris, do you like my name, Jamie? And I said, yeah, I like your name. And right then, I remembered a dream I had that night. And in that dream, I'd seen our names, Jamie and Chris, kind of written on 2 boards. And the boards were separate, but there was a mark across the boards where they came together, which is a kind of a way that a carpenter will set 2 pieces of boards together and know where they align again. And this dream recollection gave me the confidence, the understanding that there was a rightness about this move, about this whole situation, that I could be confident and feeling like I am participating in this decision on a lot of levels. So I think, from Eckankar and my study of dreams kind of brought out that moment for me. Perhaps I would have made the same decision anyway, but with this conscious decision, it became much more valuable to me and has been a touchstone through our relationship at times.
I like what you said about how it sneaks up on you sometimes, because when Jasmine was talking, I was thinking about several periods in my life where a lot of things just happened at once. And there's a subtle thread that runs through it, and you're not really always aware of it at the time. Sometimes it takes years before you actually look back and say, oh, I really did change at that time. And I was thinking of when I was 17, I was living in the South, and I was in high school, and my band went on tour with some other groups for the summer across the country. And it was very exciting for me, and I really thought we had a shot at the big time. And when we came back to town, I found out my family was moving. And I pleaded with them to let me stay where I was. I was going to be a senior in high school, so everything was going to have to change. And I didn't want to lose all my friends, and I didn't want to lose the opportunity. And my family said, forget it. You're coming with us. So we moved to Maryland, and I didn't feel like I fit there at all. And I didn't try to fit in, because all I was thinking about was going back down south and finishing what I thought we started down there. So I spent that whole year sort of plotting this escape back to the south. And I didn't even go to my graduation. I wanted to get out. So I ran back down there and tried to get things going. And I had a lot of fun, but it wasn't like I thought it was going to be at all. And nothing really worked out the way I thought it was going to at all. But one thing that did happen was I met a guitar player down there who had been to school up here. And he played a very interesting instrument, and he did things that I hadn't seen before. So I started thinking that would not be a bad thing to do, would be to study music that way. So time went on and things got worse and worse, and I had to leave because I couldn't really support myself well anymore. I was spending all my time on the road, and I couldn't go to school, and there was a lot of other problems impinging now. So I had to sort of retreat back to my family. But I had this seed in my mind now, and I started planning to come here to go to school. And that's what pushed me forward. Now I've been here my whole adult life. So everything that didn't work out pushed me in a situation where one thing did work out.
That leads me to posing the question about placing judgments on situations, and how we so frequently are always looking for the comfort zone, and so frequently looking for what we value and judge as good, whatever it is, the ukulele story was a classic example, or what was happening in your life at that moment was good, as opposed to what you consider to be dire or bad. And in that state of consciousness, we're constantly trying to kind of script the way we think our path should go. And of late, I've just been trying to flow a little more, just trying to be a little less judgmental about the outcome, and a little bit more relaxed and grateful for whatever comes. Even a pain in my arm from, we seem to be playing a lot of musical stories tonight, or telling a lot of stories. Anything I take on, if I take a different attitude about it, just pose the question, why are you looking at it that way? Flip it. Or use the analogy of walking into a different room, which is often used when we talk about states of consciousness. It's almost instantaneous what can occur, and I find it such a wonderful experience to continue to test myself in that process of staying neutral, and then looking back and saying, oh, that wasn't so bad, whatever it was,
That's the experience that I've had. I'm terribly sentimental, so I'm always looking backward and trying to go back and reconstruct things the way they were when I really felt this wonderful love, like the experience I told you living in the South. And I've been back a few times. And the one thing that I never really realized was how much I have changed, and that I couldn't go back and be what I was then, because I'm not that way anymore. It's very significant to realize you suddenly have to look at who you really are.
I think that change can be an amazing open door to ourselves, and to letting in a connection between the spiritual and our daily lives. I went through change about 8 years ago that was very difficult for me. A relationship broke up, my mother died, I moved, and it all happened within 1 year, and I had a minor operation. And it seemed so hard for me, all these changes, and I couldn't understand them. And I realized when I stopped kicking and screaming, trying to fight the change, when I did, as you said, let yourself be yourself, let yourself be neutral, I could start to see benefits. And one of the major benefits I had was I like to listen to an inner intuition and a knowingness a lot. And sometimes I'll see this in the form of a blue light or a little light. And that cues me that I'm doing something that is good, for me in my life at this time. And I went looking when I moved for a condo to live in after everything had collapsed in my life, or so I thought it collapsed. I went looking all over for a condo to live in, and I couldn't find one. And I finally found this one condo that somebody who had been there before had been a smoker. All the walls were yellowed, the cabinets were kind of coming down, the bathroom had mold, and I thought, this was at the height of the real estate market, so of course this was at a huge amount of money for me. And I thought to myself, oh, why are they taking me to show me this? Why am I here? Why are they showing me this? And all of a sudden I saw a little blue light, and I went, oh, it's time to pay attention. I ended up buying this condo and working on it and fixing it up and living there. And it's been one of the best things in my life. And I think being open to listening to ourselves, because we have the answers. We have tools that can help us get these answers in our lives. Helps in many ways with love open us up to these changes. And I think these tools are important, and there are many.
One of the things you were mentioning, and it's something that we were talking about earlier, Kathleen and I, and even with some of the others, is one way that you know you're going through a turning point is when you feel this huge resistance.
Yeah.
And it's like something you absolutely don't want to do, or something is happening and you just don't want to face it. And it's usually a sure sign that something is happening to you that you need to take a look at. I'm going to tell you, I think this is an embarrassing story, but I'll tell you anyway. Because
Good.
I play the piano. I don't do like household stuff very well. I mean, I'm just not schooled that way. I don't think about wrenches and screwdrivers and so forth. And so in the house we were living in, one of the faucets started dripping. And I kind of avoided it as long as I could. And finally it was bad enough where I said, all right, I got to do something. So what I did was shut it off and sort of stopped using it.
That's being creative.
It was something that we didn't absolutely have to have. So I sat there and I looked at it for the longest time because I really didn't know how to fix it. I had fixed a couple of things on the pipe before, but I didn't know how to do this. And I let it sit for an awfully long time, and I won't tell you how long because it would really be embarrassing. But finally, it dawned on me, I better do something about this. So I took it apart, and I knew there was a washer in there that must need to be replaced. So I took it apart and I looked at all the pieces, and I went to the hardware store and I found a little kit, and I brought it back, and I replaced the washers, and I screwed everything back together, and I turned on the water, and nothing came out. And I said, boy, I must be really terrible at this. I must be an awful household repair person. So I let it sit again for a really, really long time. And this one day I was looking at it, and I thought, I got to do something about this. So I walked over and I turned on the water, and nothing came out. And I looked and I looked and I looked very closely. And on the right at the ring where the water comes out and there's a little filter screen, I saw the tiniest bead of water there. And so I unscrewed the filter and water gushed everywhere. And I was totally shocked because I had fixed the washer. But what I had done is let it sit so long that it got sediment and mineral deposit. So no water could get through that screen anymore.
Oh, okay.
So what was the symbology?
Yeah, the symbology is huge if you stop and think about it. It's like all this time you think it's one thing and it's totally something else.
Hmm.
So here, life lessons galore,
Yeah. It's interesting how when we have we pose a question sincerely, no matter what it is, if it's spiritually, how do I move forward, or how do I fix the sink or whatever, If we're really sincere enough, eventually answers come. And they may lead us down a winding road, I mean, they always do. I mean, everything we do, every action has a consequence. Everything we do leads to something else, And next thing you know, you look back and say, wow, what a life, It's like so far, It was just, so as we're talking, it reminded me of, like I said earlier, my position of being an electronic repair person. It wasn't actually my first choice to do this it's going back quite a few years now, about 25, somewhere in there. I'm not going to go, it's a little over that, but after that, I don't count. It's like, But I was in a different relationship then, and I had been in bands playing locally in the New England area, and I was getting tired of that. And in this relationship, I had a couple of stepchildren. So I needed another job, you know. I actually wanted to be a chiropractor. That was my first choice at the time, was to be a chiropractor. But it wasn't practical because it would cost too much money. It would, you know, I was feeling very important to be a provider at the time. So I didn't know what to do, you know. So I'm going around for time. What am I going to do? If I do this, I don't know what to do. You know, I never finished college because when I was in college, I'm kind of segueing into another change here, but religion and spirituality has always been the most important thing in my life to me. Like when I was growing up, I actually really, going way back, what I really first wanted to be as a kid was a priest. You know, I grew up Catholic, and that was big. And then eventually that changed. But when I got into college, I was starting to go, and then I remember being in a history class, and there was something written in the book about Jesus walking across the desert for 40 days or something. I don't remember the exact words, but it was like, it just hit me funny, and the whole bottom dropped right out of my whole belief system. It's like, all of a sudden, I didn't know what was real anymore. So I just started, that became my whole life right then. I didn't care about school or anything. I just had to know what was real, and I started exploring these other paths, religion, and that led down a whole few things. So sideways, parallel along with that was me playing in bands, and eventually I got to this point where I didn't want to be in the band anymore. That was why I didn't finish college. That's why I mentioned that. So I didn't know what to do, but then all of a sudden one day I was working, my son was in Cub Scouts, and they were making these balsa wood planes, father-son project, and I was doing most of the work, of course. I was into it, you know, he was watching, you know. And I realized I was good at math and good at my hands, so I'll get into electronics, you know. And then I just saw a card went to a grocery store, found a little card and a little thing that said correspondence school because I was still in the band and stuff. Took a correspondence course, and eventually I ended up getting jobs in electronics, and I always liked music, so I gravitated to the music stuff, you know. So, but it's just, you know, I had this sincere, you know, knowing what was right, you know. That same sincere seeking of what was right led me to, for me, Eckankar, you know. I realized that was the path for me, you know, which it isn't for anybody. I really, like I said before, I believe everybody resonates to the path that they belong to, you know. And that's good. It doesn't really matter what it is, as long as you're sincere. The main thing is the sincerity in your seeking. And wherever it leads you, that's fine. That's where it should be.
You know, I was kind of like that also. I can go way back to like age 4 when I really wanted to learn about God. That was my dream. And my parents said I would have to wait until I was 6 to go to school. And I remember holding up my fingers. And I thought, I could remember back as like 2 years, age 2, and I put 2 more fingers. And I'm thinking 2 more, like 4 to 6. That I'm not going to be able to last that long. But you know, but soon I realized that some of the things that I went to a parochial school weren't exactly the very first day of school. I realized that Sister didn't know because she was talking about the mystery of the Trinity. And she said, no one will ever understand that because we were all asking questions. And she said, no. I raised my hand and I said, Sister, surely the Pope must understand the Trinity. And she said, no, not even the Pope. It's a mystery of faith. And right in that moment, I was thinking, no way. I didn't think God would do that to us and have this great mystery and not have at least one person that knew about it, could understand it. So that kind of colored my whole childhood. I waited until I was 12 to talk to the priests when I was confirmed that they weren't answering my questions, and I kept growing and I kept looking and searching. And then one of the tools that I've come to trust explicitly is the same tool that Ellie brought up a little earlier, was the blue light, which is a way sometimes the Holy Spirit speaks to us, you know, with different color lights. And I was seeing a big blob of blue for a number of years, and I didn't know what it was, and I never paid any attention to it. I'd see sparkles, or I'd see, but when I started to see it really a lot, like it went from, you know, twice a year to every other month to a couple times a month, until it was like starting to see it a lot. And that took me to the doctors, because I thought there must be something wrong with my eyes. And I've And he said the strangest thing to me, and I told him how I can see. He said, well, can you see through it? And I said, sure. And he said, well, be glad. He said, not everybody can see blue light. And it made me furious. And I left, and I didn't even want to pay him because I thought he was crazy to tell me to be glad about it. But it's come to be a tool that I rely on. And when I first found the Act teachings and I heard about the blue star, I longed to see it. And I never for a second thought a blob and the star were the same. And finally, after several months, just beginning on the path, I realized once that it was, a blessing to see that, and it became my guide. And I remember after I realized that, I stopped seeing it. And I was really longing and feeling very bad. I was waiting to see this blob, just kind of a shape. And then Ellie, I think I was with you one night in a class we were having, and you were saying, sometimes when I see it, it's like a little tiny speck, like a little diamond. And if you blinked, you might miss it. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, oh darn, I've been seeing that for like several months now, but I'm not looking for, I was looking for, you get expectations too. And that was a huge change for me because I came to trust, sometimes when I'm taking the wrong path or about to make a change, I'll see a little flash, just a little something. And that, my God, my spiritual guide is saying, take a closer look at this, or, stop and pause. And it's been a huge tool for me, along with Chris talking about dreams. Dreams is
Dreams are important.
And we shouldn't hesitate to say these tools are available for anybody, to anybody, and regardless of the faith. If you're on a religious path and you're satisfied with it, that's where you ought to be, and it's a good place to be. And we respect that completely. And Eckankar is the path of spiritual freedom, and it wouldn't mean anything if we didn't rejoice in other people's happiness wherever they happen to be.
I got one quick thing to say, and I think somebody wanted to say something over here about the dreams, because they are important, and about people in other faiths. I think about my mother when I think of this with dreams. It's actually what we call sometimes a waking dream, where you can picture you fall asleep in your dream and you have this experience and you wake up and you wonder what that means, and you find symbols sometimes in your dreams. Well, you can picture your whole life out here as that, and things can happen in your life that you're living, and there'll be symbols there, and you can get answers in your waking life if you just pretend it's a dream, just like your dreams are, and just look at it that way to get answers. Some people use that as a technique. And this particular time, I'm thinking of my mother. Her mother died. She was very close. And I grew up Catholic, like I believe I said before. My mother's a very devout Catholic. But there's always doubts about the afterlife, So she was having doubts because her mother was gone. So I was surprised she did this, but she asked for a sign. She said if she talked to her mother, and she says, if you're around, I'd like to see a hummingbird fly through the yard, because she knew her mother liked hummingbirds. And in my mother's house, there was never any hummingbirds, and she never put out plants or the colored things to make hummingbirds come in. So she asked this, and then the next day, 2 hummingbirds came flying through the yard, and she knew her mother was okay. And to this day, she still wears a hummingbird brooch,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's an interesting opportunity, to begin to understand that our connectedness to the outer realm that we see every day, and both through light that you described and through sound, we can really connect to it. And the more we expand our consciousness, the more we realize that it's a part of us. And so if you pick, specific symbols that you recognize as your own, they start to come into your life in the way that you just described, most unexpectedly, by way of providing you with some kind of message. And for me, just recently, I was with a woman who I really I really enjoy. I don't know her very well, but she said to me one day when I was working on an article with her, "You're gonna live in my house." I said, "Oh." and thought, that's weird, I have a house and, with my boyfriend, and that's going to be probably where I'll live for quite some time. But she said to me the next time I saw her that, she has a heart condition and she doesn't expect to live very long, and her children don't want the house, and one day I might want to come and look at it. And I said, that's good, I'll do that one day. So one day I went to visit her, and I'd sort of forgotten about that conversation, and I went to this little house which is perched right on the marsh looking due west. And it's just beautiful, and she's made it her own, and I thought, that's incredible. It's a lovely spot, and I wasn't feeling any kind of sense of proprietary interest. I just felt very inspired by what she'd done, and we decided to take a walk together. And she was telling me about how she had, when she moved to Cape Cod from New York City, she looked at a lot of properties, and this one was fairly derelict, and she thought, I'm going to know when I find my house. And she drove up to this house, and the real estate agent was kind of saying, I don't really think you were interested in this. It's sort of like the house you described.
Yeah.
But she saw an owl in the tree. And she said, wow, there's something about this. Because an owl was obviously a symbol for her as it is for me. And I thought even the fact that she said that sparked my interest. So we're walking around the neighborhood, and she was asking me about my field of architecture and, how I use messages from clients and symbology. She was just asking me how I approach my practice, and I was saying I always try and inject a little magic into it, to really listen and to try and weave into it something sacred. I don't mean necessarily spiritual in the strict sense, but just something sacred. And just as I was saying that, I looked up and I saw a horned owl, which is very unusual, at least I think it is on Cape Cod, and I think it was horned. I think it was sort of silhouetted in a tree, about this big. And I said, look at it, look at that. And she saw it. And we both looked at one another. And then the owl alighted and swooped down past us. And it was just this chilling, silent moment when I knew that was obviously a symbol. And she said, you see, you're supposed to have my house.
Yes, that's really, I like when you were saying, I just had this vision of this huge owl. That, I think one of everything everyone has said has resonated so much to me, and as people are sharing their stories, I'm kind of going through my life, and one of the things that I'm always amazed at in my life is how the Holy Spirit, or what I call the Ek sometimes, is always there, and it's a matter of me accessing it. And not the other way around. It's not a matter of, it coming to me. It's about me being there and wanting to access it. And part of that for me, a huge thing for me has been to, practice what we call spiritual exercises, to put aside time every day to, devote to contemplation and chanting the word Hu, which is an ancient name for God. And to me, that gets me in a certain vibration, that gets me in a place where I can more readily, every moment of the day, actually, and when I was younger, I would think that, God helps me when I need it.
Yeah.
And then, as I've gotten older, I have started to realize that, actually everything I do during the day can be done with God there, and with God's love, and with my own love. I just realized that it's, as I've gotten older, this kind of concept of the divine has just expanded so much, that, and it boggles my mind sometimes to think that it's always there. The issue is always my connection with it. Mm-hmm. It's never the problem with the divine. It's always my connection to that, and that's it. Whenever I have a problem, whenever there's, like Robert was saying, resistance, whatever, it's because I got a block between me and that force.
Yeah, I like what you said, and agree that there's a sense of our inner world, which is, as a spiritual person, if you're at all interested in spiritual things, one has this inner dialogue going on all the time. What am I doing here? How is Spirit talking to me? And then you have your outer life. And so they start to bridge and meld together. And since I'll share another dream, since I was on a first dream, and I'll describe the dream first and then show you how I kind of interpret it. It was at night in a high school, and I'm walking in after hours, and I'm cleaning up some kind of mess on the floor. There's a custodian down the hall, but I'm avoiding him. And as he kind of approaches, I kind of scoot off, walk up the stairs, and a curving stair to the second level, and there's a pool there. And all of a sudden it's daytime, and there's all these people in the pool, and they're playing and splashing in the water. And as an architect, you'll appreciate this part.
I think
I'm thinking, this is great. How could I design this pool so that it was an indoor-outdoor pool? Because then we could both use it, when the weather's nice and when it's not nice, we would just have a sliding door. It'd be way more efficient. So that was the dream. And so as you work with dreams, you kind of think about it, and you develop your own kind of ways to analyze them and the symbols that are involved. But recently I'm becoming more aware that they're very simple sort of one-to-one relationship between a symbol or an action and the dream itself. So night school, inner teachings, making a mess, feeling bad about it. There's a certain guilt and karmic situation. The custodian, in Ekankar we have the inner and outer master, the living Ekmaster, the Mahanta, and positions of authority in dreams tend to often be that inner master. And so I was feeling some reluctance to be in that presence with that guilt. But then I kind of took a creative step, this curving stairway, to the second level, higher consciousness, and see the pool, spirit, the sharing of life with others in the openness of every day. And then this idea about designing sliding door to create this inner-outer experience. Well, inner and outer between the inner world and the outer world. How can we do that individually in our own lives as soul? This magical, marvelous journey we're on to create and meld the two aspects in our journey. So that became a kind of a nice interpretation for me for that dream, and gave me a sense that yes, there are these connections and parallels.
And another way, I love what Jasmine said about it's always around us and all we need to do is find a way to access. And another way you can do that is to create what we think of as a waking dream. In other words, you're saying, these are the symbols that I want to use. And I can give you a quick example. A few years back, I had a feeling that I should start looking for a new job, but I wasn't really sure I wanted to leave because I was fairly comfortable where I was. And so I decided to try this waking dream technique. And I always believe that if you use really outrageous symbols, you're going to have the best success if it's not something you expect to see. So I used red and green elephants. And I said, show me a red one and that means stop, and show me a green one and that means go, forward. And so I put that in the stew pot and let it simmer for a while, and I didn't see anything. And the next day went by and I didn't see anything, and I was watching everywhere, looking at the TV, looking in my books, everywhere. And I didn't see any elephants. And this went on for a little while, and then one day I was at work and I was trying to finish up a resume. I decided to print it, and I put it through a couple of printers and it wouldn't go. But I said, well, I decided to do this, so I'm going to be ready in case it's green, right? So I went up to my supervisor's office to use the printer there. And I walked in the door and I stood completely still, and I looked, and not on his desk there was an answering machine, and next to that was a red carved elephant. And one of his students, he had a grad student from India, and one of their practices, one of their traditions is to give their employer a gift. And that's what he'd given was a red elephant. So I knew, for now, not to do anything. But curiously enough, two years later, I walked into the administrative office, and on her desk there's this elephant. And I said, wow. And it was an elephant carved in soapstone, and inside it there was another elephant. So it was a big elephant and a little elephant. And I looked at it, and I said to her at her desk, I said, that looks kind of green, doesn't it? She says, yeah, it does. And so I knew it was time to move on. And so I proceeded, and there was really only one place that I wanted to work in this profession. I decided if it wasn't for that, I would just leave it and do something else. And so I sent out 20 resumes, and the one place that I wanted to work called me.
Wow.
Can I add something
Yeah.
to that? Well, what I always found interesting to what happened to Robert about that story was that job at this one place, the only place he wanted to work, had been listed on the net for a year. She had been interviewing, and it was like waiting for him. He had another opportunity to leave a year before. And sometimes these changes, they are meant just for you. And
Sometimes, oh, did you?
Yeah, before you can come in, just one thing, because we still have a bit of time here, but it's getting close. And Jasmine had mentioned about the hue and singing the hue, and that's a way, by singing the word hue, we learn to connect with this inner part of ourselves that gives us guidance. And you mentioned nudges or waking dreams and just people's intuition. Really just you just connect with your intuition more, you start relying on it more and hearing it more. Just that's a way to connect with the inner too. And I just so people can hear what the hue sounds like, maybe we'll just sing it 3 times,
Great.
So it's just very simple. It's like the man's name, Hugh, and it's a word for God, and it's just, we sing it and we don't have no expectations when we sing it. We don't we don't use it to create anything, to have any, I'm trying to think of the right word, but it's just done with love. It's just expressing God's love for us and our love back. And what were you going to say?
I was going to say not directed.
Yeah, it's a non-directed prayer. You could say it's a non-directed prayer. And the prayer is really listening and expressing love, and that's all it is. And it's about gratitude. And Joy had shared a story earlier about gratitude, just being in the moment and seeing gratitude in things. So it gives all that. And I've been in Eckankar over 30 years, and I notice as I've used this, the main benefit I get is just this. I see how different I am now than I was before, and how much more quality of life I have. It's not always joyful. There's problems and stuff. It's not like it's just, fantasy of joy, but it's very rich. I feel very aware, and I think the consciousness, a lot of it is about awareness. So let's sing this hue 3 times, and so you can, if you were to do it at home, you could close your eyes or not, and it's just it's like the man's name. So here we go. Times we sing that and I bring that, we held for a second there's some quietness, some peace there. That's what it can bring. It can bring you to a quiet place inside you where you can better hear what Spirit is saying. And sometimes we sing for 10, 15 minutes and we just have some moments of silence. We're not going to do that right here, but just did that so you can get a sense of what it's like.